I am your Godzilla of the truth. Great to have you with us. Follow us on Twitter at JF Radio Show. Hey, we're all over covering everything just for you, not sitting in the office like everybody else. We go all over the world, all over the country, bringing you the action at the rallies. We're there. Brian Kemp joining us now. He is the Republican standard bearer. Won the nomination. He's running for governor of Georgia. That'll be decided November 6th. With all the other elections, he's running against Stacey Abrams, the Democrat state legislator there. Brian Kemp coming in second in the Republican primary to 16-year incumbent Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle, who really wanted the job bad. And Cagle almost getting 50%, which in Georgia, which got the best primary process in America, which is you run the primary. If you don't get 50%, you have a runoff, 2 top finishers. And if you voted in the first primary in one party, in the second runoff, you can't cross over. But in the first one, you can just say, hey, I want to vote in the Republican primary, the Democrat, doesn't matter, party registration, but then you can't cross over if there's a runoff. But then in the general, you can do whatever you want. It's the best process in America for selecting candidates. So Kemp finishes second, then gets the backing of Mike Pence over the weekend before the runoff, and then gets the endorsement tweet from President Trump on Monday, and then beats Cagle, he was trailing almost the whole time, beats him by 50 points. I'm not kidding. I'm not making this up. And I know Brian Kemp back from my Atlanta days when he ran for Secretary of State, ran a great race there, and he is the Secretary of State. I think that was, if memory serves me, let's see, Nathan Deal got elected 2010, I'm going to say. So he's been there for, I think, 2 terms, if I got all this in my head. I didn't look any of this up, Brian. And he's with us now, Republican gubernatorial candidate, my home state of Georgia, Brian Kemp. Good to have you with us, Brian.
Hey, John, good morning. It's great to be back on with you. It's been a little while, but I hope you're doing well.
I'm doing fine, and I guess probably the last time I saw you was probably at a gubernatorial debate that we hosted, like spring of 2010 or something. So it's been a long time, but I've been following your career, and now you're favored to be elected the next governor of Georgia. Tell us a little bit about your opponent, Stacey Abrams, the Democratic legislator that you really called too radical for Georgia. Can you define some of the issues that separate your campaigns?
Yeah, well, that's about all you really need to say. I mean, her views are a lot different than mine. You know, I ran a campaign from day one over the last 15 months about putting Georgians first ahead of the special interest, the status quo, the politically correct, and those that are here illegally. And, of course, she's just got very different views. I mean, her belief is we need to grow government. We need to raise taxes to pay for it. You know, she just said in the recent days going after law enforcement, saying that non-citizens need to be eligible for the Hope Scholarship. You know, that is not putting Georgians first. That is what people in this state are tired of. They were wondering who is going to fight for them. As I traveled this state to all 159 counties, and I've been to every single one of them, people are wanting to know, you know, who is up there fighting for us? Who's going to take the fight and fight for the working family out there and for all those hardworking men and women around our state that are trying to provide a better life for their families and have the same opportunities as anyone else. And that's what I've been talking to people about, and that's why we'll be successful in November. But we cannot take this race lightly. Stacey Abrams is the darling of the radical left who's being funded by, you know, George Soros. President Obama endorsed her the other day. She's got money pouring in from California and New York and Massachusetts and every other liberal activist around the country trying to manipulate this race. So it's a national race. It'll be the most watched race in the country because of its historic, purpose. But we can't let that distract us from being the candidate and the campaign that I'm going to be of putting Georgians first. But we need your listeners and everyone else around the country, those conservatives, to rally behind us and help us financially or help us with grassroots to win this race.
If somebody did want to get involved in your campaign and maybe send you guys a donation, Brian, because this is going to be a tough race and the Democrats are putting money into Stacey Abrams' campaign coming nationally. George Soros is going to give her money. It's all going to come from Hollywood and everything else. Where do they go?
They can go to kempforgovernor.com. I mean, any contribution is welcome, and we've had a lot of them from around the country because they know what we're up against. George Soros has already sent $1 million to the Democratic Party of Georgia. I'm sure there'll be a lot more than that coming. I fully expect her to raise $30-40 million like the Democrats poured into John Ossoff. Much of that money coming from out of the country to try to win that race against Karen Handel. But she fought hard and prevailed, and I'm planning on doing the exact same thing, but we need everyone's help. So kempforgovernor.com.
Now, one thing I want to ask you about is Georgia has an interesting immigration enforcement law that allows sheriff deputies to assist with ICE and the other deportation people to help enforce federal immigration laws. Now, as we understand it, I was not there, but from news reports that we saw, Stacey Abrams at a town hall in Dalton, Georgia, which is kind of about couple hours up from Atlanta, up in northern Georgia, about 30 minutes south of Chattanooga. She criticized this program and said that the 287G program, which it is, was terrorizing families and that it could prevent some in the country illegally from reporting crimes. But, I mean, the object of getting deputies involved, sheriff's deputies, to help ICE is basically if you're in the country illegally and you're breaking the law. I mean, I just don't understand what the problem is in seeking these people out because they're criminals.
Well, and look, John, you're exactly right. This is about criminals. This is about people that are peddling drugs or doing violent crimes and, sex trafficking, drug dealers, folks that are tied in with gangs or illegal drug cartels. And, the radical left is just outraged when you actually want to deport someone that's a violent criminal. I mean, It just does not make any sense. And that's why Georgians and Americans are so fed up. And a lot of the sheriffs, the more conservative ones, are participating in 287G. Some are not. I have actually two plans to have real public safety reforms to keep our families safe. Two of the federal prosecutors that I've been talking to that Donald Trump has appointed since he got in office, thank goodness. One of them, B.J. Pack, who I served with in the legislature, has said that Georgia has become a distribution hub to the Mexican drug cartel. There's no question that we have tens of thousands of gang members in the state that are wreaking havoc on our families every day in our state, shooting up our neighborhoods and our young children and recruiting them to get involved in just at unthinkable ages now when you think about 13, 14, 15-year-old kids being involved in violent gang activities and shootings and everything else. And that's why I have built a plan for public safety reform with two initiatives. One is to immediately track and deport those bad criminal aliens that have broken the law in violent crimes and getting them out of the country or getting them incarcerated, where we stop the revolving door in this whole cycle that continues on and on. The second is to stop and dismantle gangs in our state. I mean, it is outrageous how many gangs there are. We need to give law enforcement and prosecutors more tools. I'm not blaming them at all. They just need more tools to work with, and I'm going to be a governor that's going to make that happen.
Let me ask you something, Brian. Kemp, with us, the 2018 Republican gubernatorial nominee, Secretary of State. Brian Kemp with us here on the John Fredericks Radio Network, Trucking the Truth Across America. He's also is going up against Democratic nominee Stacey Abrams. This will be decided in November 6th for the next governor of Georgia to replace the term-limited two-term Republican Governor Nathan Deal. So, Brian, let me ask you this. How did Georgia, why are there so many, you cited the illegal gangs there, and so many of these gangs have been come into Georgia now that it's a real, you called it almost an epidemic. How did this happen? Just walk us through how this happened.
Well, and look, John, this hasn't just happened. The legislature passed a law over 8 years ago calling the gang situation in Georgia a crisis. They created a street gang database where we could actually tear down silos and provide information not only the local but the state and federal law enforcement folks, corrections officers, and prosecutors to help go after these people, identify them, make sure if they're caught that they're not coming back and doing these crimes again, that they're taken care of through the rule of law. But that database was never funded, so this has been going on for a long time, and it's a lot like the sex trafficking that's been going on in the opioid epidemic, which is not a Georgia central problem. It's happening all over the country. But 10 years ago, nobody was talking about the opioid epidemic or not talking much about sex trafficking, and now everyone is. So it's one of those issues that's been creeping up on us a long time. So part of my plan is not to scare people, but is to raise public awareness where we start dealing with it, not only at the state level, but at the local level as well. And we have, unfortunately, some liberal communities in our state that their law enforcement does not want to participate in some of these things, and that's why we need a state law that will mandate this reporting so we can create the two databases or fund one of them and create and fund the other one, where we can tear down the silos and go after these criminal illegals and these street gangs. And I know the vast majority of Georgians want that to happen. They're worried about their families. As a father of 3 teenage daughters, that's a concern of Marty and mine with our 3 girls, is keeping them safe. And we're not going to remain the number one state in the country for business if we can't keep our folks safe and keep our business owners and our working Georgians safe. And that's why I've been so focused on this. And quite honestly, my opponent has very different views to this.
Well, what could be a different view that makes sense that isn't cracking down on street violence and street gangs? I mean, what other view could there be?
Well, I mean, she doesn't want to, she doesn't want to make these mandatory reporting processes at the local level. She doesn't support law enforcement cooperating in the 287G program. She wants to do away, I think, with a lot of the bails that we have, just turning people out, crime after crime after crime. And, I'm very supportive and sympathetic to what Governor Deal's worked on with criminal justice reform. Mm-hmm. But also, as a part of that, we need to build off that and have public safety reform. I mean, we keep letting the same people out day after day that keep committing the same crimes in the same neighborhoods. It's frustrating to law enforcement. They feel like no one has their back. It's dangerous for our communities. And, these small property crimes turn into people, getting involved with gangs, becoming a gang member. Next thing you know, they're selling drugs. Next thing you know, they're getting your kids and your teenagers hooked on these drugs. And then, they're ended up in some sort of shooting where someone's dying literally in our neighborhood. It's happening every day. I mean, there was a high school teacher, for goodness sakes, that was arrested on 3 different murder charges, and he was teaching high school and recruiting kids in the high school. I mean, that is outrageous, and it's time that we did something about it.
No question about it. Like, I'm a big proponent of justice reform. Our recidivism is too high. There's too many people in prison. But when you've got street gangs that are infiltrating your schools and putting your families at risk, I mean, you just have to step in and do something. I think you're doing the right thing. I've got a couple more minutes. I really want to get to Georgia's exact match voter registration law, Brian Kemp, that you're in favor of. Now, as Secretary of State, obviously you were involved in this from a bird's eye view because of the position in the state of Secretary of State that you had. How is that law different than some other states? How does it work, and why are you in favor of it?
Well, we have robust processes on many things regarding elections in Georgia. I ran on having secure, accessible, and fair elections. So the first part of that is making sure our elections are secure, updating our voter rolls, keeping them clean, doing list maintenance, which is required under federal law. Unfortunately, some states do not participate in this. We do in Georgia. It's a very long process of moving someone from active to inactive to off the rolls, almost around a 7-year period, many notices. Because, John, as you know, people will move out of state. They don't let us know they've moved out of state. They'll register somewhere else, and they're also registered in Georgia. People are, deceased. people are moving from one county to another and not telling you. So if they're not updating their information, they're voting in the wrong precinct and the wrong races, even though they live in a different county. So it's important for us to keep that up to date, and we have robust processes to do that. Now, the left has repeatedly sued us over that because they think it's outrageous that we remove anyone from the voter rolls, even though federal law requires it. So it's almost insane that I get accused of voter suppression by them when we're actually doing the right thing to keep our voter rolls up to date and secure, and I'll always fight for that, and I have in the past. But also, I think it's important to talk about accessibility. You know, we created the online voter registration system. When I first got in office, you know, it has been incredible how many people we've registered to vote. There's about 800,000 more people on our rolls now than when I took office.
Wow.
We created, and people can register literally, John, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They don't even have to talk to anyone in our office, at a county registrar's office. They can just simply go online, and there's a secure process for them to get registered to vote. You know, we fought for the citizenship check to make sure that we're verifying citizenship before we register people. I've fought and defended our common sense photo ID law. But I've also done things like create the Student Ambassadors Program, where we now have over 1,500 high school kids in over 150 schools that are promoting voter registration. So you're never going to hear my opponent or the left talk about that, but the number of 17 and a half, you can register to vote when you're 17 and a half in Georgia. You have to be 18 to vote in the election. But the number of 17 and a half and 18-year-olds that have registered to vote in the last 3 years has doubled because of this program. So we're doing a lot of things to keep our elections secure, but we're also doing a lot of things to keep them accessible.
And so you're reaching out to high school students, young people, when they turn 17 and a half. You've got 1,500 ambassadors. Get them involved, get them in the rolls, and yet you're accused of voter suppression. How does that work, Brian?
Every day. Well, and, you know, it's the liberal media in places like where you are, Washington, D.C., and these other places that are driving the narrative for Stacey Abrams. They know what's at stake at this election, but that's why we need conservatives and other just common sense-minded Americans from around the country to rally and help our campaign. And let's send a message and say that we're not going to put up with fake news. We're not going to be bullied by the left, that we're going to do the right thing even when no one's watching, and that's what I'm planning on doing as governor. Would you say that,
I'm in D.C., so I haven't been back in Atlanta in some time. Would you say that the coverage you've gotten from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the main paper in the Atlanta metropolitan area, do you think the coverage has been accurate and fair up to now?
Well, I think it kind of depends on what day it is and what reporter it is. But, you know, that's something we're used to. We just got to keep fighting. You know, Republicans are always going to have a hard time with the media in a lot of places, especially the national news, and it is very frustrating, but it's what we got to deal with, so there's no need to complain about it. We just got to work hard. We appreciate people like you that will help us get our message out across the country.
All right, we're out of time. Brian, give your website again for people that want to get involved in your campaign and help you get elected in governor, whether come down there, make phone calls from wherever they might live in the U.S. or send you $25 to help your campaign out. Where do they go?
Kemp4governor.com, and that's KEMP as in Paul, forgovernor.com. Thanks so much for having me on, John.